Soma, Darina, and Raz stood before the frosted glass door. The gold-plated sign read, "Private Investigations." They pushed inside without waiting for a knock. Mint was already pacing, her boots clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. She stopped at her desk and shoved a stack of blueprints across the surface. The paper slid, catching on the edge of a heavy lamp. "The Tea Party murder mystery," Mint said, her voice dropping to a low, hard edge. She pressed a finger onto a red circle marked on the manor map. "It is not a game tonight. Someone is using the event as a cover for something much worse." The trio leaned in, eyes tracking the lines. No one spoke. The air in the room felt tight, heavy with the weight of the upcoming operation. Soma looked at the map, then at Mint, and nodded once. They turned in unison and exited the office, moving quickly toward the street. The city lights blurred as they climbed into their vehicle. The manor was waiting, and the clock was already running. They had their target, their route, and their orders. Now, they just had to survive the night. The ballroom air was thick with jasmine and the hum of polite conversation. Waiters moved in rigid, synchronized patterns through the crowd. Soma scanned the room, eyes darting between the guests, until a server paused near him. It was Sora. She leaned in, the movement fluid and practiced, pouring tea. "I am undercover," she whispered, the words barely audible over the music. "Watch the basement." Soma caught Darina and Raz's gaze across the room. A subtle nod was all it took. They drifted toward the edge of the ballroom, slipping behind a heavy velvet curtain that concealed a service door. The transition was immediate. The warmth of the party vanished, replaced by a damp, biting chill as they descended the stone stairs. The basement was dark, lit only by the sliver of light from the doorway above. Soma knelt, fingers probing the uneven floorboards until he felt a loose edge. He pried it up with a sharp crack. Beneath the wood sat a glass jar. He pulled it into the light. Inside were not tea leaves, but finely shredded chemical compounds. "This is the source," Soma muttered. The game was over. The evidence was in their hands. The warehouse stood on the city outskirts, a fortress of cold steel and shadows. Soma, Darina, and Raz moved along the perimeter, avoiding the sweeping beams of security lights. They found a rusted ladder clinging to the side of the structure and climbed, the metal groaning under their weight. At the top, they squeezed through a narrow ventilation shaft, the cramped space smelling of grease and ozone. They dropped silently into the CEO's office. The room was sterile, dominated by a massive mahogany desk. Soma moved to the terminal, tapping the screen to wake the system. A holographic display flickered to life, projecting a detailed floor plan of the manor. A red target icon blinked over the CEO's own wife. "There it is," Soma whispered. Raz stepped forward, pulling a drive from his pocket and plugging it into the terminal. The screen turned blue, a progress bar appearing at the center. 20%. The cursor blinked, steady and slow. 50%. Darina paced the room, watching the hallway door. Every second stretched. 90%. Raz kept his eyes locked on the screen. They were seconds away. The progress bar hit 100%. Raz slammed the enter key, the command sent, and the screen went black. A siren erupted, a jagged, piercing wail that tore through the office. Red emergency lights began to pulse, bathing the room in a rhythmic, bloody glow. The door burst inward, splintering under the force of a heavy kick. Guards flooded the office, batons raised, eyes fixed on the terminal. Soma lunged, grabbing a heavy mahogany chair and swinging it in a wide arc to clear the doorway. The impact sent a guard reeling into the hallway. Darina pivoted, catching a second guard's wrist and twisting it until he dropped his weapon, then shoved him into the path of the others. Raz stood his ground at the desk, shielding the drive with his body. The CEO lunged forward, fingers outstretched, desperate to reclaim the evidence. Suddenly, the glass windows exploded inward. Shards of crystal rained down as Nancy and her tactical squad rappelled from the ceiling, boots hitting the floor in perfect unison. "Police! Nobody move!" Nancy shouted, her weapon leveled at the CEO. Nancy crossed the floor in 3 strides and slammed the CEO against the desk. The shouting faded, replaced by the sharp click of handcuffs and the rhythmic movement of the tactical squad clearing the floor. Nancy led the CEO toward the exit, his head bowed, the fight drained from his frame. Mint stepped into the room, her gaze steady. She reached out, her fingers closing over the drive that held the evidence. She nodded to Soma, Darina, and Raz. Outside, the city lights flickered against the warehouse walls. Suddenly, the main power grid groaned, and every light in the facility died at once. The case was closed. They turned toward the exit, leaving the cold steel of the fortress behind as the mission reached its final, quiet end.